somebody want to comply with it.
But it's really weird because it's a whole other layer.
Yeah, no,
Nothing's going away.
It's a packet of plenty.
I think it's a bad idea.
it's more doesn't-
Really small, it's not fitting.
Always take out and look at the employee, what it costs.
Yeah, we'll have to figure it out.
Employee.
Hey, Jeff,
And I didn't realize that they're not all in your general fund.
coming back.
We've got, so you have to add it up from where,
Four cars lined
because I was gonna
up and on count.
kind of say to you, well, only have a quarter million.
Surprised there wasn't a- That's bad.
So that's this guy's.
Hi, how are you?
That's a bad,
It's not.
bad area. Good thing.
No, we have to report this to Gene Rose and Illinois County and see if they'll do something. I'd like to call our 7/24/19 City Council meeting to order. It is 7:02 PM, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first item would be the consent agenda. Would someone make a motion to approve, please?
Move to approve the consent agenda,
Is there a
numbers
second?
4 through 6.
Second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We'll move to letter C, which is the Planning Commission report.
Good evening, City Council. Planning Commission held their meeting on July 17th, 2019. All members were present, and 4 out of the 5 council members were also present. A public hearing was held for a pool safety cover variance request, and the cover is a ASTM F1346-91 type of cover. This is international standards that are developed and published, and the United States has adopted these standards. After the discussion was held, it was determined that the applicant had met all 6 of the variance criteria, and the Planning Commission is presenting the variance for William and Amy Sieben at 9623 192nd Avenue in Columbus on the acceptable use of a certified pool cover in lieu of the fence, and we recommend approval of this.
Anyone have any questions? I think we're all at that meeting. And if not, would someone like to make a motion?
Mr. Mayor, just a quick point of reference on page 37 are the 2 conditions that were recommended for, to go along with the variance. They're at the bottom of page 37 of your packet. So any motion should include those conditions.
Thank you.
Okay, motion to approve the pool cover that was being considered with the recommendations, staff recommendations 1 and 2 on page 37.
Would someone like to second that, please?
second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries.
We, at the Planning Commission level, did discuss the possibility of adding this to our pool ordinance, and we would like the opportunity to have it looked at if that is okay with the city council. do a text amendment and add it into there.
Elizabeth, would you note that, please?
I will.
Thank you.
I'm kind of unclear as to what we just agreed to. What, we're going to change the ordinance to accept pool covers in any, on all pools in Columbus? Is that what the deal is?
No,
No.
using the
Pool covers?
certified pool, international language that gives us that criteria to use those pool covers. It'll be a certified pool cover. It won't be just any pool cover.
And this is just for the.
On just this property or on all properties within Columbus?
Well, we'd like to put it in as a possible use in the ordinance because it doesn't speak to it right now. It just speaks to fences.
Okay,
But what we just passed was just the variance
right,
Right.
for this one location.
okay.
I think the second request, though, however, was for the planning commission to look into a text amendment to allow pool covers in the city code.
In lieu of, or just,
I
To
think,
include, not in lieu of the fence, to include that as a possibility.
as a possibility? Okay.
Correct, right. It would still be determined by the city council whether it would be acceptable or not, and you'd look at the topography and the demographics and everything, but at least it would be an opportunity for residents to be able to utilize that, maybe.
the code today is, it's an administrative permit for a pool. So if you were to do a text amendment and the language would remain the same today, it would not come before the council. It would just, depending on how you did the text amendment, you might, if you want it to come before you, then you would direct the planning commission to say that it was a interim use permit to use a pool cover or something of that nature to come before you, but, because today it's part of a building permit, and it's just administratively processed.
But we can discuss that out before we do our final vote.
You can discuss it, you know what I mean, if you move forward and accept the direction that the planning commission would like to work on a text amendment, they can certainly do that. I just wanted to make sure you understood that today the code doesn't require pools to come before you to get approved.
Correct, as long as they have the fence,
As long
or
as
the
they have the
fence
fence.
doesn't. So if we adopted this, it would be the same thing. They could have a fence or a pool cover,
Theoretically, yes.
and it all handled administratively.
If that's how you draft the ordinance, yes. I heard that you could evaluate it if there was more acreage or stuff, and then that's not how it's today. It's one or the other, that criteria is not in the ordinance.
And we're asking for a request to look at it, so we would look at every avenue before presenting something.
Thank you.
On the John Arndt motion, apparently the applicant has asked to postpone that until our next presentation. So a hearing and discussion on Chapter 8 subdivision road specifications. We did that evening, and after discussing the MnDOT specs, changes, the changes that the Planning Commission is bringing forward, a recommendation for approval for the revisions to that Ordinance 1903.
The ordinance amendment is to add, for developers who do subdivisions in the residential district, it's to add to a thicker road base. More road base. I don't know how you want to verbalize that, but more road base. And the other is to instruct the roads to MnDOT standards. I think those were the edits. Did I get that right, Dennis?
Yeah, just MnDOT nomenclature for different types of materials.
And you want to explain, Dennis, the reason why? when they're putting the roads in the new,
For the thickness?
yeah.
Yeah, the old standards were 3 inches of pavement on 4 inches of gravel base, and that's, typically that's a thinner section than you'd see for new subdivisions. Some of the paving of gravel roads that the city does, you may have 12, 18, 24 inches of gravel that the traffic's been driving on for years. So when you have a new development and you're going across new field, that they've compacted the existing material, but you typically see 3 or 3.5 inches on 6 at a minimum. Sometimes it's even thicker depending on the soil types. So we were just recommending upgrading it to a standard section of 3.5 inches of pavement on 6 inches of gravel.
Does anyone have any questions? If not, would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend we accept the Chapter 8 subdivision road specs in our pamphlet, it was put in front of us, brought up from the Planning Commission.
In a second, please.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
That was ordinance 1903,
What was it again?
correct?
Okay, update on the future mixed-use zoning district. This was quite a lengthy discussion. And we went over each of the uses and discussed what types of uses would be recommended in each district, the CI and CR districts. We talked about design standards in the CI district for each mixed use, like building, design, architectural designs, details, exterior walls, surfaces, materials. You guys were all there, so it was a very long discussion. And we're still in the works of this discussion. And we also talked about dimensional criteria. We just barely kind of touched on it barely, and then structural height. And after over an hour, that ended. And that all is also videotaped for the Planning Commission meetings, so if anybody wants to go and watch the in-depth portion of it and see all the discussion, it's available there. And I think that was just like an update for you guys as well. And then we had to report on the motion for the Haggard Park land disposal. And there was a motion made that the sale of the parcel 033222340006 would be zoned as rural residential, and that is consistent with the Columbus 2040 Comprehensive Plan.
All right. Elizabeth, there has been some emails, et cetera, from some of the Haggard family. So, yep. Do you want to go into some background on this? Or maybe Bill would like to?
I can start. A year ago, the park board evaluated all the parkland that we had and made a recommendation to the city council that some of the parkland that we had, because there wasn't any plans to improve it, they felt that it would be in the best interest of the city to dispose of some of the parkland. So with that motion, that it was the direction to our city attorney to look at what the process would be, because nobody really knew what the process was. Some of the parkland was given to the city through parkland dedication from Subdivision. Others we received through tax forfeiture. And so the two parcels that were looked at first, there was a list of 6 or 7 parcels, and the first 2 on the list were Howard Lake Park and Haggard Park. And so our attorney made a chart indicating to us, what the procedure was and what the process was going to be. And so we started looking at it, and I delegated it to Jessie, and she started the process she met with the attorneys, and she put together a memo for the city council. And at your last meeting, you talked briefly about starting the process. The second part of that process was to go before the planning commission to make a report to make sure it was consistent with the either 2030 or 2040 plan. In this case, it's consistent with the 2040 plan, and then continue on. My suggestion to Jessie was that we would hold a neighborhood meeting for the Haggard Park, as we didn't really talk about to the neighbors, whereas the Howard Lake Park, there were surveys sent out and there were phone calls made, and there was a lot more information on that park. And so right now, we removed some of the equipment out of Howard Lake, and it's become more of a passive park. But it was the determination of the memo that after 30 years, when the city retains a park for more than 30 years, it becomes land that the city owns, and they can dispose of it as they feel appropriate after 30 years. And all of the parcels, with the exception of 2 or 3 of them, we have held for over 30 years. So at this point, it is the council's discretion as to what you would like to do with it. It's just the Haggard Park has not been improved. The public access to it, although we have dedicated roadway, it's not a public road. In other words, it's not a paved road. It's used as a driveway today. So I think the park board felt that it would take a lot of money to improve the roadway to get an access to it and to improve the park. So, but again, it's the council's decision as to whether you want to move forward or not, but the direction to us was to move forward with at least the Haggard Park and the Howard Lake Park, which is what we've done.
So if we move forward, what are the next steps?
We just started working on title review for the property, and then we would get an appraisal on the property, and then we would hold a neighborhood meeting with the neighbors. And as part of the title review process, that's when we would determine the easements that need to be maintained in order to develop it into a public right-of-way. If you remember, there's 33 feet that needs to be maintained, and then enough for a cul-de-sac at the end of the road. And that would happen during title review.
And all of that's for Haggard Park.
And how did the city come to have this property? This was a part of a development?
It was, I don't believe it was part of a development. It was, so there's about 3 ways that you can acquire park property, maybe more. But the city can directly purchase park property using its own funds, or a park fund that's established as part of the development process. You can require it of a subdivider if you want to have an internal park to the subdivision, or if you feel that lands within the subdivision are appropriate for parks. And then sometimes there's a grant of parkland, as there was in this case. There was a restriction on this grant of parkland, this conveyance of parkland to the city, that it be used for a park. And that restriction ran for 30 years, and it is no longer effective against the property. And so it was at that time that the city was free to decide how to either to retain or dispose of the property.
Howard Lake Park was acquired through tax forfeiture.
The Howard Lake, the little piece on the south side of Howard Lake.
Correct, both pieces. There's 2 pieces.
Anyone have a discussion? Mhm.
Yes, at
So-
the mayor's discretion.
They can come up. Anybody up here have anything to say before that? Then come up to the mic. State your name and address for the record, please.
Mr. Mayor, my name is Tom Haggart.
My address is 1023 18th Avenue, Southeast Forest Lake, Minnesota, in the city of Forest Lake proper. I did, however, grow up out in here and spent much of my life out here, and I am the son of Elmer Haggard. I would like to give you a little history, and I'll keep this as condensed as possible. I know how valuable your time is, and I will try not to keep you here too long. In 1986, our family had 4 children. 2 of them were mentally retarded, and as such, were taken care of by the state, with my mom and dad bearing some of the burdens of the costs. One of the ways they did this was selling properties. They were selling their farm off. They came across the particular parcel of land that's in question tonight. They had approached the city council about selling it, and it was told there was no easement or way for people to get back there, so they would not allow them to sell it. My parents decided, well, that's what the city council decided, that's fine. They decided their next best thing would be to do in memory of their children that are still alive today at the ages of 50 and 52 in a group home. They would donate the money or donate the property for a park. That was done. The city, in its wisdom, has built a beautiful park over here, and there's nothing can be taken away from that. And our family realizes that this is not a parcel that would realistically be developed into a park. We're all grown-up adults here. There's no sense beating around the bush. Now it's come up what to do with the property, being it can't be used as a park. I'm trying not to be offended hearing the words of appropriate ways to dispose of the property. To me, that means the end of something. When my father donated this to the city council, he did it in a fair and honest way, and my father has always been a fair, equitable, and honorable kind of man. Now, as you decide the fate of this property, I would ask you to consider the intent with which it was given and look at the most honorable and equitable way to dispose of this property. I have a suggestion for you, but that's none of my business because my father's estate has been settled and I have no legal or financial interest in this property. I would like to see it go back to the current property owner that owns the original farmstead or offered for sale to the adjoining people that own the property. That's about all I got to say. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer you. If not, I'm going to take my seat.
Don't go yet. So your 2 suggestions for, and don't be offended by disposing.
I'm not offended. I'm a retired police officer. I'm not
By
offended
winding
easily.
it up or rolling it up or wrapping it up, since it's not going to be a park. So don't be offended by that.
I'm not in the least.
All right. So either you would prefer offer it back to the,
Current property owner, which, let's not beat around the bush, is my daughter. She currently has purchased the farm out of my father's estate. I don't beat around the bush, I don't lie, and I don't paint anything to be a better picture than it is.
okay, and that's adjoining this property?
I believe it is. I have not seen it for years, the legal layout, but I believe it still adjoins the original property.
Or offer it also to someone who already adjoins it? Was that yours?
I would say what I would like to see is it given to one of them, but I realize you guys got to make money too. Sell it at a fair and equitable price to one of the adjoining property owners and refer this back to the Planning Commission, if nothing else, for a little discussion on this matter.
We can do that, and we'll be discussing it. Because we're actually only like in the second step of, all we've done is get it into the comp plan as rural residential so that something is able to be done with it.
Right.
Am I correct? I got that. So this is,
I've given you 2 somethings you could choose to do with it, Mr.
this is a
Mayor.
pretty fast, or a pretty, not a long process, but how long till we get our comp plan back? 6 months, 3 months? So we do have time to discuss it and figure out which path we're going to take. So, okay, one option is back to your daughter. The other option is that you.
To offer it to an adjoining property owner.
And just to clarify, Mr. Mayor, what you're saying, Mr. Haggard, is to offer it for sale, or?
Yes, sir,
Okay.
unless you want to give it to him.
Oh, make it into a park? No. All right.
It was given to the city originally at no cost.
Yes, and it's too bad it didn't get made into something,
And
but
we're realistic, that's never going to be a park. I knew that the minute my dad did it.
so I guess, first of all, thank you to your dad on behalf of the other city councils before us and us. And all we're going to do tonight is make a motion to proceed along this pathway.
I was just trying to hope to prevent it being sold at tonight, have it referred back. Thank you very
So
much,
nothing
Mr. Mayor.
is happening that quick, so please watch your TV shows when you see
Oh, I
us,
will.
or watch the minutes.
Yes,
Or talk to anybody, and you'll be informed and be on the whole loop all the way up.
I'll be more than happy to watch it.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Yep.
Thank you, city council members.
So, everyone, so we're right, kind of in the middle of the process, would you say, Elizabeth?
I think in the middle.
Beginning,
Yeah,
more towards the beginning, I would say.
Still the beginning?
So
Yeah.
you're doing a title search and that kind of
Title
stuff?
review first, yeah, and then we'll get an appraisal on the property, and then a neighborhood meeting.
Okay.
It's the current plan. And I don't know that you need to make a motion tonight. I think that was just direction and an update.
Mr. Mayor and Council, one thing I would indicate, we're a little further than the beginning only because the steps that were taken to determine that this parkland was access to the city's needs and that it would be taken out of the comp plan. So that determination has already been made.
Okay.
So, that would be hard to undo because it's, sitting at the Met Council with it showing as rural residential. But otherwise, I think one of the things we should look at as part of our review, and we can work with Jessica on this, is whether the city council has the option to transfer it back, essentially transfer it back to an heir or an adjoining parcel, or whether we're obligated, because it's now city property unrestricted by the covenant, to get the fair market value. I think in real estate, we often say that the best buyers are adjoining buyers because, they can do more with a remnant parcel than, say, someone else. So it may be that the adjoining owners are the best bidders in the process, but that doesn't necessarily, mandate that it go to them. So I'd like your permission to do a little bit of research on whether that is an option, since that's something that was asked of you.
Yeah,
That's okay?
I say yes. Anyone else disagree with having him research it more?
Can we give it away as opposed to sell it?
Correct.
And I'm not saying that that's what your intention is, but we should know whether you have that legal authority.
So take that as a
Direction?
direction to,
Might be a good law school project.
all right. So we don't need any kind of motion on that?
And so the final point was the Running Aces Harness Park and Hotel variance request. We, the Planning Commission, had heard this several meetings ago, and so Elizabeth is going to give you guys the update on this.
Mr. John Seibert is here tonight with Running Aces Park.
Would you like to come up to the front, in case you have something to add? Name and address for the record, please.
And good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm John Seibert. I live at 16271 Royal Road in Ramsey, Minnesota. And I appreciate the opportunity this evening to once again address the issue of a variance for a sign for the Running Aces complex. The signage request that we have is one where we're looking at putting a rooftop sign on the hotel. And currently, there is no ordinance or any varying different statute that says we can put a roof-mounted sign on that horse racing district. Given the way that the building is designed, we're unable to put a typical sign, building-mounted sign on the building because it interferes with the windows. We are underneath of the square footage allowance that we're allowed. We're allowed up to 1,700, and we have like 1,200 square feet of building sign. So to that end, what the variance really is more one in which we're requesting to be able to mount it on the roof rather than to mount it on the wall. The south sign of the building is roughly 84 feet by 12 feet, and that's the one that's going to face basically the racetrack. And the building is at somewhat of an angle, so it will not impede against neighbors and that sort of thing, and it's really intended to be able to allow it to be seen from the Interstate 35. The north sign, which is roughly 70 by 10 feet, is again mounted to the roof of the building and is intended obviously for the people that come into the complex to be able to see where the hotel is at. It will not obviously be seen as well from the interstate and that sort of thing. And I've driven the sight lines a number of times, and it's pretty tough to see any of that particular part. I mean, if you get glimpses of it and that sort of thing, but that really was not the intent of that. And in addition to that, we're also updating and modifying the sign that's on the canopy of the current Running Aces Casino facility. And that does also stick up slightly above the wall sign. And the wall sign, I believe, is allowed to be 20 inches or so above, and this is like 45 inches above it. So it is slightly above what's again allowed for a building-mounted sign. So tonight, what we're doing is we're requesting approval of the variance request that we've presented to the Planning Commission, and I'm happy to answer any of your specific questions you might have on it.
This is two requests, so there are two different variances, and the variances are on two different addresses, so they do have to be taken up in two different motions in adopting the findings, because they are both variances.
I only see one motion here.
No, there's two. There's two.
Does that cover both of them?
No, there's
I think
two.
there's two.
One there and one there.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, so does anyone have any more questions or discussion?
And John, you understand the condition that the Planning Commission made the suggestion for the,
Maintenance and repair of the sign? Yes, yeah. And I have checked with the sign manufacturer and that sort of thing. He said, first off, he said, you're not going to end up having the normal breakdown that you might get on a neon sign, and this is not neon. This is, high-end LED, GE type of application, so it's a very good sign from that perspective. And if a bulb burns out, it doesn't take out the whole system. If one of the power systems burns out, then that would end up taking out a section. And normal sections on these are about 30 feet. So to that end, you would end up getting a lapse in it. And the way the Planning Commission put it forth was one where if we didn't get it repaired within 7 days, then at that particular point in time, we had to shut the sign off. And I've been assured that we can get it repaired well inside of that 7 days.
And do you plan to redo the casino sign at the same time, or will that be done sooner?
They're all going to be done at the same time, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
All being done by the same manufacturer, and they'll deliver all the signs at the same time.
And when do you anticipate?
I anticipate that that'll probably end up being in the latter part of November right now. What it really is hinging upon is getting the ephes, which is the exterior of the building, finished. Once that gets finished, then we're in a position where we can roll in with the signs and put the signs on the building.
I don't know if the council knows that you're doing, both buildings the same.
Explain that just a little bit more to me, Elizabeth.
Didn't you say that it's going to match the hotel?
Okay, so what's the phase 2 plan of this whole process is that the hotel is an upgrade from what the original casino design was. So what we're doing is we're putting the hotel up, and then we're going to come into Phase 2, and Phase 2 is when we're going to end up making the casino match the hotel. And so it's going to be a facelift in the entire project. And it'll end up making it look more like it was a consistent project from the start, rather than, oh yeah, they added a hotel onto the property now. So the ownership group is very cognizant of the fact that they want this to be very kind of a one-looking type of a property. So Phase 2 is planned in for next year, 2020.
Thanks.
Anyone have any more questions? And who would like to start making motions?
I'll move to adopt the findings from the city staff report dated 6/17/19 and approve the application for a variance at Running Aces Horse Track 15201 Zurich Street sign to increase the allowed projection of a wall sign from 2 feet to 69 inches in the HR district, subject to the following condition: that 7 days will be allotted for repairs to lighting, and if repairs are unable to be made within that time, complete shutdown of the illumination is required until repairs are complete.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes.
Let me do the next one? Sure. So then I'll move to adopt the findings from the city staff report dated 6/17/19 and approve the application for a variance at 15215 Zurich Street, the Running Aces Hotel, to allow sign types to permit 2 roof signs in the HR district, subject to the following conditions: that 7 days will be allotted for repairs to lighting. If repairs are unable to be made within that time, complete shutdown of illumination is required until repairs are complete.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. All right. Thank you.
So are there any questions or anything that you want brought back to the planning commission from the council this evening?
Anyone? No?
What's that? Yeah.
If everyone will look on the back page, please, of your amended agenda. We're looking for a motion to call a special meeting for the City Council and Planning Commission to discuss more on the future mixed-use zoning district ordinance. And that would be on August 5th from 4 to 6 p.m. And that's a Wednesday before Planning Commission, and then the Planning Commission from 7 till 9. Does anybody know they cannot be here for that meeting?
August 5th?
So this was at
Yeah.
the last planning commission meeting, we had a discussion for about an hour, and we had a lot to discuss. And I think at this point, the agendas are quite tight with applications for the planning commission. And so I think under the under the design standards, it was felt maybe that we should have a special meeting so that we can actually dedicate a night to talk about design standards. Because I think Hyla has a pretty long presentation, and it's trying to discuss that while we're doing all the other applications. It is quite hard. And the August agenda, I'm full on both times. So we thought maybe that a different night would be helpful. And we looked at schedules, looked at Hyla's schedule, and looking at that schedule, August 5th was a night that Hyla was available. I had a person to take minutes. It was just now a matter of whether the planning commission felt that was a good way to go, and whether the council felt it was a good way to go. Otherwise, we will still try to put it in between the other discussion, but knowing that I think I have 3 hearings on each of the meetings in August. So it's just that we're just kind of in a time crunch right now for design standards, and I'm getting pushed from contractors or not contractors, but potential developers to ask me what the standards are. So it's up to all of you as to what you feel is appropriate.
And I think it's this is an important decision. And we can spend a couple hours extra talking about it, hashing it out, that's good. If you cannot be there,
Why are we having two separate meetings? Like City council, I mean, shouldn't the planning commission and city council have the same meeting? Sit down together?
You know, it was, the last time we did the land use, Hyla felt that it worked out really well, meeting with the 5 council members, trying to get their feedback, and then doing the same presentation with the planning commission. Sometimes when you have 10 people, that's a hard discussion to have. But, and we used the same format. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. That's the format we used for land use discussion.
and that had worked out good because a lot of people came to both meetings. So you got a real 4-hour solid block of thinking about what we're going to accept and have for design standards for the next 25 years. So, would anybody like to make that motion?
Motion to call, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, motion. Move to call special meeting for City Council and Planning Commission to discuss new future mixed-use zoning districts ordinance amendment language on August 5th, 2019, from 4 to 6 for the City Council and 7 to 9 for the Planning Commission.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And that motion passes. And if you cannot be there, that's acceptable, but if you can, everybody's input is important. And now we're up to number 7, which is the public open forum. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak? All right, then we'll have the Park Board report, number 8. Anybody here to do a Park Board report?
Okay.
We met, Mr. Mayor and Council, and went over the budget for the Park Board. So we'll be presenting that at some point in September. But we also talked to, the Park Board, and Elizabeth and I kind of walked over to the park and talked about where we were going to put the park bench for the Eagle Scout. And then we also have you want to talk about that?
Good.
We have a memory bench that we are going to put in the park on the tennis court side. And the city, or the Park Board, purchased that bench, and the Columbus Lions are going to put a tree in there and put a dedication plaque for the past Lions that have passed away and served Columbus. So we talked about those locations and just kind of did a little park tour, looked at park equipment and you know, the need that, you know, we need to start upgrading and stuff because the pieces are breaking and we're removing and you know, just updating stuff. So it took us a little bit of time to do that, but that's in a nutshell what we did. So any questions?
So they made 3 motions. One was to purchase picnic tables. During the park, they understood that the picnic tables are in disrepair in the picnic shelter. And they did vote to buy 4 tables that were, regular picnic tables that were quite heavy, so they weren't real movable. And then the last one will be handicap accessible. So it's a total of 5 with 1 handicap accessible. And I believe they're going to be 72 inches long in order.
They're going to be 8 feet.
8 feet long for the park shelter. They also talked about electricity, and this has come up on a number of occasions because we do not have electricity in the picnic shelter. And when people do come in, when they reserve the picnic shelter, they're always asking us about electricity to hook up a crock pot or whatever it is, music, whatever they wanted to do. And so they felt it was important that we have the opportunity for electricity in the picnic shelter, and so they did authorize or make a motion to put electricity and find out how much that would cost. The last, what was the last motion, Jim? Oh, concrete walkways. We have, every year, we've tried to make the park ADA accessible with a few more improvements. And in this case, we do not have a cement walkway to the picnic shelter, nor do we have it to the swing set. So we are going to, the Public Works Department is going to do the work, but we have to purchase the cement for the walkways. And currently for picnic tables, we're going to put them on cement slabs like we've had in the past. So there's a slab for the memory bench and the slab for a picnic table that does not match. We have one that doesn't match anything, but it's in good repair. So we're going to put it out in the park on a cement slab. So they also made a motion to do all of that work.
And I did meet with Mark Daly about the electrical. He put a call into Connexus. They're 3 weeks out to come out and just figure out where we could mount the electrical boxes, how they can get power over there before we can really get too far into it. And I need to talk to you about that at some point, but I did order the picnic tables. Should be here this week, by the end of the week. So we'll get those put together. They'll be out there before Fall Fest. Our intent also with the memory bench is to have that done so the Lions can dedicate that during Fall Fest. So we got a little bit of work to do.
And do you anticipate doing the electric before winter?
That would be the hope. We talked about trying to get it done before Fall Fest, but not knowing how they're gonna get the power over there, I didn't really wanna deal with, bare ground, trenches and trying to get all that seeded and back to green grass before Fall Fest. So I think we were just gonna hold off and try to do it after, if that's possible. So we kinda gotta see what Connexus has to say as to where we can get power from and really if it's feasible at that point, because, the cost might be relatively large to get it over there. So we're still doing a little legwork on that.
So we'll wait and see.
Yes.
All right.
How does the electric work? Do they, like if they rent the pavilion or the little area there, is it locked up until, and then you unlock it for them, or is the just open electricity all the time?
So talking to Mark, we were gonna set a pedestal out there that is similar to what you would have if you go into an RV park. So I don't really know what it looks like. I've not been to an RV park, but it's an enclosure and it's lockable. So I think it's kind of up to, the city as to how we wanna operate that. So do you wanna lock it up all the time or, leave power on? I don't really know what the direction will be at that point, but it is lockable.
We talked about a timer, we talked about whether it should be open to park goers, because Lori indicated that, yes, the picnic shelter is rented, but she goes, oftentimes, because it's open, there are people using the picnic shelter. So that's why we talked about a timer, maybe putting it on a 20-minute timer or something, so if someone needed electric, and then it would go off.
We talked about lights initially too, and
Yeah,
I
we
think the
talked about
timer was
lights.
more so for the lights, but then we kind of discussed that, the park is open from dusk till dawn, so really there shouldn't be anybody out there at night anyway, so I think we kind of 86 the thought of the lighting, but just the power at that point for outlets. So,
Were you thinking that you wanted to only have the electricity when people were renting the picnic shelter?
Well, that's one thought, or the fact that, somebody could go in there and hook in an electric blanket, in November and take a nap out there. You're drawing, electricity that the city's paying for. And if when you were talking about crock pots and things like that, they're heating elements and they take a little more electricity. So I don't know. That goes onto our electric bill, right?
yes, it would.
It would, yeah, it would be, right now, the park board pays, the park pays for their own electricity, so they have their own meter, because there's 2 lights out there today.
Yep. They pay,
Security lights.
I think it's $425 a year
Yeah.
for electricity, currently.
maybe have someone check with some other parks that have enclosures or shelters and see what, do they leave it on all the time, or do they
Right.
lock it up or whatever?
I mean, I really think that, I mean, I think at the end of the year, it's probably not gonna be a massive dollar amount. And it might be more trouble to manage it, to try to figure out, you know, do only the people that rent it get it? I mean, it's probably easy enough to come up with a policy on how you work it, but, you know, if you rent it, then do you get a key to unlock it? Or, I mean, how does that work? You know what I mean? So there would have to be some thought process in on that, but it's
Well, I
obviously,
would
Well,
say,
for instance, I mean, Lionel, is it no, Centerville at their park, you know, you get a key to, there's a building that you can rent, and then you have access to electric, but there's nothing then outside that you can use. You have to,
you have to go inside? Well, we could build a structure.
I don't know, I mean, it just, it
Okay,
occurred to me
we can
that
have a structure
some,
built, I don't want to build a structure.
yeah, somebody might just abuse it, and I'm just trying to figure out a way to prevent.
We actually have had a fair amount of vandalism in our parks in the last month. So I don't want to get too elaborate with what we do over there because we do have some troubles.
Well, I've noticed people like sleeping in hammocks and, you know, kind of hanging out for quite a long time. Like I said, electric blanket's great.
They are across the street from the police station. Might be somewhat visible.
Do they,
anything else?
do they have a timeline for the Eagle Scout bench? Just curious
Well,
how
I'm gonna
he's
meet with-
progressing on that.
I'm going to meet with them on Monday.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know what their timeline is. I don't know if their intent was to try to get it all done this year, or, I mean, I guess you have to have it done by the time you're 18, and he's only 15, so he's got a little bit of time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
3 years to build it.
yeah, I don't know how ambitious he's going to try to be, so,
Well, I think
I'll
he
figure
had
all
to
that stuff out on
fundraise
Monday.
first, so probably the timeline is somewhat contingent on his ability to raise the dollars to buy the materials, but,
So he wanted to know, so I'm going to meet with him and his mom on Monday. And show him where we want it and discuss all of that. And I don't know, I'll figure out what their intent is. If maybe they want to put the concrete in and then fundraise and put the bench in later. So I'll figure that out.
well, the reason I was asking is because I know when we met with them, we also thought about maybe doing some sort of, something in line with Fall Fest,
Right.
if he was, so that was the reason for asking the question. Maybe not this year's Fall Fest, but a
Right.
Fall Fest.
So I don't know how aggressive his timeline's going to
Okay.
be because, I mean, we're rapidly coming up on Fall Fest. So, I mean, he'd have to move along pretty quick to get it all done.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Well,
you want to talk about the Public Works one right away?
Sure,
As long as I'm sitting here?
go ahead.
Okay.
Then you don't have to sit all night. Okay, let's hop down, everyone, please, to number 12, Public Works Report.
I was traveling north on Notre Dame about 2 weeks ago, and I noticed a bunch of new no parking signs by the school. So I did a little bit of research trying to figure out who put them there, why they were there. I ultimately ended up going and talking to Neil Fox, which is the principal of the school. He had no idea they were there. So we walked out, looked at them, and then we went inside, and he said that my maintenance guy might know. So we stopped and talked to him, and he's like, well, I don't know anything about it either. So then he ended up calling another guy. So we got quite a ways down the line. And it turns out that about 2 weeks ago, there was a little kid that almost got hit by a car. And the story goes, without the signs there, people pull up to the baseball field or, you know, T-ball field, whatever they're using it for at that point. And with all the cars parked there, a little kid ran between the cars and just about got hit on Kettle River. So they decided that that's clearly a safety hazard, which I'm sure we can all agree with. So they peppered the whole area with no parking signs to stop people from pulling in there. I advised them that they're not legal no parking signs because they haven't been approved by the city council. So we moved up to Steve Massey. He sent us an email that basically is requesting that we put some no parking signs out there. We have some further down the road, so I guess what I'm requesting is approval to have them remove theirs. We'll put the appropriate amount of signs in at the right spacing and where we need them, and try to keep some little kid from getting hit.
So this is the area that, this is Notre Dame, by the way, it's not Kettle River, but this is Notre Dame.
Did I say Kettle River? I'm sorry.
In front of the school, these were the signs that were put up, you can see people park along here, because this is the ball field.
So they have 7 double-sided signs in about 50 feet. So my request is to not put that many in.
It's a subtle hint, don't
But-
park here.
Correct. It's very, very functional, but, you know, not, if a police officer was to give somebody a ticket for parking there and they went to court and fought it, there's nothing saying that those signs can be there, so technically you could get out of the ticket.
Well, it's
So-
actually, the signs say that it's by order of the fire chief.
Oh, yeah. So actually I did call the fire chief too. And he's like, I don't know anything about it. So, yes, you're right.
Very inventive.
So I'm just looking for a motion to allow Public Works to put up some no parking signs there. And I guess what I was gonna ask them to do is if they wanna put their signs off of the right of way on their property, just as an extra measure to suck up some more space, they're more than welcome to do that, but they just can't be in the right of way.
How many signs do you need?
I would probably put, because if you look up further, there's a no parking sign there, and then you can kind of see another one up the way. I would probably add 2 in there, and I would basically say no parking between signs. So I would put one, I don't know, just a little north of the 35-mile-an-hour sign, and then put another one by the tree line, and then just kind of go up to the end of their property, so.
And is that for both sides of the street or just that?
Well, there really isn't a place to park on the other side, and that hasn't been an issue at this point, so my intent is to not put signs up everywhere, but to try to do what is reasonable.
So would someone like to make a motion?
It's my recollection that no parking signs have to be approved through resolution. So you can direct that we will put up no parking signs, but we'll bring back a resolution at the next meeting. We'll put it in the consent agenda.
Sounds good.
Who wants to make that one?
We make a resolution, the motion, or?
So
Or just
you're gonna,
directing staff.
you're gonna direct staff to draft a resolution to bring back to put on the consent agenda, but direct the Public Works Superintendent to move forward with the project.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes.
The kids will appreciate it. And Public Works Advisory Committee did meet last night, and we went through our budget, which obviously we'll be bringing forward in the next month or so. So that is all I have.
Thank you.
Anybody mind if I go home for the night?
Go
No,
for it.
Go for it.
All right. Have a great night. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so now we're going to back up to engineer report number 9.
Yeah, just a quick update on projects again. The 2019 street improvements, Kettle River and 181st is substantially complete. We will have the contractor back out to fix some of the sawing and sealing that they did, so it meets spec. Northeast quadrant of 3597 utilities is also substantially complete, the sewer and water extension for the northeast quadrant. We'll also be having the contractor back out to fix some punch list items on some of the structures. The southwest utilities down on 54, we have that easement from the southwest property owner, and the contractor's anticipating remobilizing next week, depending on his subcontractor's, directional drilling subcontractor schedule. I don't anticipate if he does start next week, that project would take probably through the end of August to finish. We continue to work on Hornsby Street realignment. Got comments back from MnDOT today that they're, for the most part, satisfactory with all the other comments we've addressed. And that project's being administered by the county because of the funding, so we're working with the county and MnDOT to get that project advertised in August and get it under construction by September of this year. And that project will be split over the fall and spring. One other, it's not a construction project, but we resubmitted the local surface water management plan today to the three watersheds and Met Council, incorporating all the watersheds and Met Council's comments and the city's mostly recently updated land use zoning maps and everything, all the other maps.
What's the status on the bridge on 54?
The 54 over 35? Yeah, they reopened that 2-3 weeks ago. I was never found out what the exact problem was. So
Okay.
I don't know. It was closed for about 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks.
Thought it was still closed, I guess.
It's open now.
All right.
For a couple weeks. And lastly, I just wanted to put in a pitch or remind you about Hornsby Street South, that I'd like to get that back on your radar, back on the agenda. If the council desires to get that constructed next year, design needs to start relatively soon. Summer's over, half over, which I don't want to hear, but
A good half is
it's a
over.
big project and it involves wetlands, and it's not just a straightforward resurfacing. So I don't know, what's the best venue to put that back on, a next city council meeting or
Aren't we having a
Is that our
workshop
next
on that?
workshop,
work
isn't it?
session?
Earlier, when we were at the workshop, we indicated that we would spend part of our workshop meeting on talking about Hornsby Street because we felt it was closely related to the budget discussion. And during that workshop, there's going to be a rather large discussion about budget. So we were going to combine that discussion during that meeting.
That's the end of August. Right?
So if you happen to be here, you can pitch it.
Okay.
And what about the bridge? Any new update on the concrete?
Have not heard when MnDOT delayed 3 times closing the off-ramp, the northbound off and on-ramp. Have not heard what the latest is. In lieu of that, I see they're working on 97 on the south side, east of the freeway, and then they're working on across from Holiday on the north side. So they're working on both sections of 97, storm sewer, gravel, paving.
Are they
anything
putting
kind
a
of-
sidewalk in? Is that what they were doing today? I wasn't quite sure what they were doing on the
Across from
north
Holiday?
side. Yeah.
I think they were also excavating for the remaining street widening that needs to happen,
Oh,
and then the path as well.
okay.
Path's on the north side. But I have not heard what the latest is with their closing the ramps and getting their concrete. I think I mentioned to you last time that we've seen bids coming in 20 to 30% high, so not only are blacktop and concrete are in short demand, but contractors are just also very busy. So we're taking that into account when we bid Hornsby Street coming up.
But if we bid it in the winter or
If it's split,
early
that'll help.
spring,
Should help the costs.
good. Anyone else have any questions for Dennis? Anything else?
That's it.
All right. Attorney's report, and we're going to deal with the Lackner.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council, we have before you an amendment to it's an amendment in whole, but it's an amendment of the Lackner's Development Agreement. Councilmember Hegland has been working with them to, essentially create some relief to the payment for the escrows for future road construction on Zodiac, and it's now timed out to, the developer will pay 1/2 at the time of the sale of each parcel. So it'll be collected then. Normally, we collect at the time of plating. With larger subdivisions, that's not a hardship, but with a small one, that can be a hardship. So that's essentially what's worked out here, and I think we're ready for approval.
I have a question. Can you talk a little bit about Section 4, the future petitions? I think I had some suggested wording, which I don't think you liked. So,
Well, couple items of background. So what we typically do in a development agreement is we have the developer waive their rights of appeal for future assessments. So the idea is the developer is responsible for building the roads, but if the developer is not going to do that, then the developer doesn't get to defeat the motion to build the roads. And so in this setting, we modified that so it isn't a Chapter 429 waiver, but it's actually saying you don't get to vote no on a future project that you've now escrowed against, because they can escrow, but then they can try and defeat the project. And maybe their 2 votes is enough to defeat the project. So it doesn't make sense to have them escrow and turn around and later be able to defeat the project.
right.
And then the other thing we try to avoid is tying a future council's hands on a project, because the road improvement projects, the vote on them, as we've said, is advisory. So it's not a controlling vote. And so we don't want that future council to somehow be, have their hands tied, as to how that vote goes down. So that was our rationale. But in all things, it's advice, and you get to make the final call.
So I think what my concern was is that I think the intent was to say they don't get to vote down a future improvement, and that instead of, I think what their concern was some earlier language made it sound like they had to vote yes. And so we tried to address that by saying your vote, we basically will take you out of the denominator, and and we won't count your vote whether you vote yes or no.
Right.
And I think this still says that, but then I think it's should the city elect to disregard, it sort of opens that door for future waffling on this, which I think they're not going to be. I mean, I would feel the same way as I would them. I've not talked to them, so I can't tell you for sure how they'd feel about that. But I was just wondering if there's a way to word this in a way that doesn't have that sort of waffling language, because it just feels like it creates mistrust.
I think you could, I think you can strike the second sentence and just leave the first sentence.
So strike the one that says, should the city elect? That's what I was thinking too. So I think if we could do that, I'd feel a lot better about it.
Yeah, I think that works. And now we're not tying a future council's hands because the developer doesn't have a vote, but we're not saying that they can, they can disregard it in the future, but we're not saying what happens if they do.
Or can we just strike the should the city elect to disregard the developer's vote on such a petition and leave the developer's position shall not be construed as a vote in opposition? So it clarifies that really how it would be handled. You're not in the denominator and you're not in the numerator. So just strike the first part of that second sentence.
Sure.
Okay, then I'd be really happy.
Okay.
Thank you.
I know you've done a lot of work getting this across the finish line.
Strike from where?
So from should to the comma.
Should the city elect to disregard developer's vote on such a petition is stricken,
Yep,
and developer's position shall not be construed as a vote in opposition to
Right.
such a petition remains.
then I think we're all on the same page.
Okay?
Thank you so much.
Sure.
So do you want to make the motion?
Oh, absolutely. So, yeah, I have a little bit vested interest. So I move to approve the Lackner First Amendment to the development agreement with the changes of striking, should the city elect to disregard developer's vote on such a petition from Section 4.
For a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
There's been more amendments than a typical development agreement. But it's done, so
Yes.
that's the
Good
important thing.
deal.
Mr. Mayor, the next item, we're going to ask the council to defer to your first meeting in August. That way, the access agreement for Hy-Vee and the development agreement will come on the same agenda. I know that Mr. Hoy, who represents Hy-Vee, wants to address the access agreement. So, and he may also want to address the development agreement. So if I don't think that needs a motion. It'll just be, come up again in a couple of weeks.
All right, anything else?
That's all I have.
That's it?
Thank you.
City council members' reports. Anyone have anything? Danny?
I attended a park board meeting for Janet, and Jim kind of said everything that I had to say. As much I got to say, add to that, he did real good. I also, yesterday, attended a Public Works Advisory, and Jim kind of covered that for me, too. So, that's all I got.
Janet?
I had a big plan. Nothing's gone, everything's gone now, so.
Let's see, so I attended, and actually you did too, you attended Fall Fest. I couldn't let you talk about Fall Fest.
Well, what's to say about Fall Fest?
It's just moving along swimmingly. Lori's doing a great job keeping everybody on track. I think there's a couple new things that are going to happen this year. I think we've talked about like the petting zoo, but there's a couple new food vendors. I took your advice and invited Sunrise River.
What do they say?
Not only are they going to come and bring a display and a table and a tent, but they're also going to bring the Anoka Conservation District. So there'll be two
Good.
new displays there, educational displays. We're going to catch some tree frogs and something that'll draw the kids there. So I think they'll have materials and, I don't know, probably some frog coloring books or something. So that'll be nice. So yeah, Lori's doing a great job keeping everybody on track for Fall Fest. And then the second thing is that I was last week at and Shelley was there too, at the Sunrise Water Management Organization meeting. The thing that was presented there, and Ben did a great job, was the Thurnbeck Joint Powers Agreement. So I guess they had some changes they wanted to the language, and hopefully you have that, and then the people can sign off on it.
So we received, I did forward the comments to Nick Tomchek at Rice Creek Watershed District. He just returned the comments yesterday. I forwarded them on to Jamie, and I have not heard back from Jamie yet, I don't think.
Is there a deadline that we need to have that done by, or? The reason I'm asking is because I have to go to a public hearing on the 1st, and so if getting signatures or doing something, I have an opportunity to do that for
Bring that.
you.
So if we coordinate it, then we can maybe, because I'm sure that chairman, you know what I mean, that would be convenient, because otherwise someone would have to go to his house or meet another time to sign it. So that would be convenient.
Okay. And then the last thing is that as part of the Sunrise WMO, I was also asked to serve as an alternate on their One Watershed, One Plan meeting that was held a few days ago in Wyoming, Minnesota. So I actually am trying to get myself educated on this because I haven't really been involved on it, but it's evidently something new that's been proposed to consolidate the funding that's now, I think, distributed through the counties. Is that correct?
To the county.
The counties?
They brought it for us a couple of years ago, and it's to combine all the watersheds, the funding for all the watersheds.
Right, so despite the title, One Watershed, One Plan, it's more like 50 watersheds, 50 plans, which evidently is a lot less than there are now, but it doesn't sound like it. And the purpose of the meeting was and they've had several meetings, they've been meeting for almost a year, I think. So they've kind of defined program areas and some prioritization, and the purpose of the meeting this past week was to talk about what the organization would look like. So much to my dismay, it's not eliminating any layers, it's actually adding another layer, and the question was, what would that layer look like, and then how would it be organized? Would it be a joint powers agreement, a joint Powers entity, and there's evidently been some work done in some of the other watershed districts that could potentially serve as models, but that's about as far as we got, so stay tuned. I think it's going to make it even more complicated than it is now, unfortunately.
I can't imagine how one funding source could possibly work for 50 different entities.
Can I add a little thing? It was originally supposed to be cut everything down one, like it says, one water. It didn't turn out that way, though.
No, it isn't. So there's actually a map on Bowser that shows like the outlines of each of the 50 consolidated watershed districts. And it doesn't really follow county lines or anything. So I mean, you know, there were people there that were county commissioners, and there were people from watershed management organizations and watershed districts, and it's just pretty confusing. My understanding is that the dollars that are typically available for watershed districts and WMOs to apply for on a competitive basis will then all flow through these 50 different entities, and they will make the decision based on their plans who gets the money. So I have no idea what that means in terms of what we pay Sunrise, or how it would function the same or different than it does now with the city. I think we would still be the LGU for them, but stay tuned. Keep you posted.
I have nothing new to report.
Shelley?
I have nothing.
Nothing? Good, because I have a lot.
Oh, no.
So I'll go quick. At our workshop, we discussed a schedule for some budget meetings coming up, and then for the workshop with Hyla on the design standards. So do we need a motion or direction, or?
You made the motion under the planning commission report for the special meeting for Hyla and doing the design standards, and now you will need motion for budget meetings.
So would someone like to make a motion for 2 budget meetings, September 10th and 17th, from 6 to 8 p.m., and both days are Tuesdays?
Make a motion for 2 separate budget meetings, September 10th, 6 to 8, and the other one was September
17th.
17th, 6 to 8.
A second, please.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, my next issue I had was, on Monday, we had a meeting with the Director of Censuses or something. So anyway, he works out of Minneapolis. His headquarters are in Chicago. And next year, in 2020, we have the census coming. He was very sincere about counting every single person fairly and once, so that was good. But he wants, or what is necessary from the city is, maybe at the next meeting, we'll make a resolution or a letter to him explaining our involvement. And what they want to do, or what is commonly done, or what is now done, I think this is new, is the city chooses 3, 4, or 5 people to be on a overseeing committee. He had a name for that, and I don't remember what it is. And the people who end up going, the role of this group is to strongly support accuracy and timeliness of people doing their census reporting, which is quite a thick thing. And the reason they're so sincere about it is because however the money, there's $675 billion is distributed each year. And it's distributed by the numbers. So if your town or your area or your district is underreported, you're receiving less of this amount of money. So it behooves us and anyone else to have every single person, or as many as we can, fill out every bit of information and get it in. Fortunately, Columbus has a high rate of people returning their census documents accurately or accurately filled out. I think he said it was like 82%, 80?
It was pretty high.
And so he said if we could just get it up to 85 or 86%, it would be a little bit better. So anyway, he has sent, emailed tons and tons of things that I have to read. I'll do all that. We'll get it figured out. We'll take volunteers who can be from the citizens in general and/or some of us, and start forming this up, because he had dates set for every single thing. You know, next September, this September, something happens, December, something happens, January, all the way till they start taking the census. I think it begins April 1st. So in our spare time, we can do that. And the final thing that I have is the letter that it was an addition to our packet, and this is from Matt Karst from Edelweiss Street in Cedar, Minnesota. Anyway, he was coming from Running Aces, it seems, and crossing, or taking Camp 3 Road across Kettle River, and was in an accident. And he says, I also saw the city council notes that tree cutting in the ditches was thought of a possible solution, but the trees were already cut when he was hit. So he's asking if we can have a reduced speed sign or a blind intersection sign placed on southbound Kettle River. And I asked Elizabeth, what do you do, what's next? And she said that would be to send a copy of this and get in contact with Jane Rose from Anoka County, from the Highway Department, have them research it or review it or look at it and decide if we can have a sign put there, or there was talk, I don't know, last year or 2 years ago about straightening that intersection so it's not coming off at an angle. It can be a little bit hard to see. And of course, with everybody avoiding 35, the traffic on that road is worse than it ever was. In fact, Annie, you just said you had a...
Yeah, I think that Kettle River, where it goes into Lake Drive, is there very dangerous also.
On your end, on the south end?
Yeah, the far end where deads into Lake Drive. I was there when I came back on my break. With the traffic, there was about 7 cars backed up and one guy turning on Kettle River. And that's just a place to accident to happen, because you can't turn around, you can't go around them on the left-hand side, and somebody's going to end up doing it.
So I will see that this Jane Rose gets a copy of this, and we'll pursue it and see what we can do.
Dennis, do you know whether is there a criteria that counties basically use as to when they would put a blind section, or is there like warrants like they do a traffic light or criteria?
Yeah, I don't think there's formal warrants like MnDOT uses, but they use certain criteria. The geometrics of that intersection, it's not a blind intersection, it's a skewed intersection. So I don't know what signage they might come back with recommending.
So they just send out engineer to look at it and see.
Yeah.
Because I know when I leave here, and then I take a left onto Camp 3 Road to go over 23, well, you can't really, I think a good sign, I agree with him, you know, left turn ahead or stop ahead or whatever, would cue you that somebody's might come dashing out of there, and also give you a hint that that's where the road is. Because as you drive, you see the stop sign that goes down to the south,
Right.
where it goes on to 23. And by the time you hit your brakes, you're already sliding through the intersection. So I guess we'll just talk to them and see what they'll say.
Right. I mean, she's the traffic engineer and traffic department, so it'd be the best place to start.
Yeah. All right, that's all I have. Elizabeth, I think you're up next.
Jesse, do you have anything?
I'm up next, and no, I don't have anything.
Sorry. All right.
I just have a short report. I thought I was going to be able to bring this up at the workshop, but actually we ran out of time. So it's more of a human resources than a personnel committee report, but, so I have 2 items. One short here. So I have 2 things on the agenda. First one is Employee compensation, we have 3 employees who are eligible for a step increase. And so my recommendation is, based on performance, that each one of them get a step increase, and that would be effective pay period 6, as they were eligible in March, and we're now in July. I'm a little behind the schedule with employee review, so I got a little behind and now trying to catch up, as we were quite busy in the early months of the season. And for those of you who don't know about step increases, each of our employees we're on a step system, and there's 7 steps in our scales. And so it's a yearly review process, and each one of them are eligible for a step increase on a yearly basis according to our employee handbook. And based on performance, you get a recommendation, and it is at your discretion to award a step increase. And in this case, I've done performance evaluations and are recommending step increases. Now, it just happens to be that we have certain employees in March, certain employees in January, and an employee in October that are eligible for increases. It's basically on their anniversary that they're eligible for a step increase.
And for us that are new, this is how it's done? I mean, this is the,
So most government, most government entities, you're either a union shop and you have, contract negotiations, and generally they're 3-year contracts, and so you negotiate every 3 years with a particular union, and it's pretty much all set. Here in Columbus, we're not a union shop, and so we look at it as on an annual basis, and depending on whether it's a cost of living, which is generally done once a year at the end of the year, or if you do step increases on a yearly basis. One thing that's different for Columbus, most communities only have a 5-step scale because it's a 20% scale. We pretty much it's industry standard. And again, Columbus has a little bit of an expansion of it, because within the first 6 months, you're eligible for a step increase. But it's a 20% increase, and the idea is when you're hired, there's a job scale, and by the end of 5 or 7 years, based on performance, you know that you will have a 20% increase of your wages over that time. And like I said, I didn't invent the system. This is the system that is used throughout, cities and or townships that I'm aware of. And this is not the same as the pay equity or the pay equity that we're doing reporting. It's 2 different things.
anybody have any discussion?
So what happens after you hit step 7? Then do you get sort of annual allocation, but it doesn't get tagged on to your base salary, or how does that work?
No, you're just, your cost of living, you only are eligible for cost of living increases.
Okay.
Unless you have a reclassification of job.
Okay.
And the reason it's different, so Jim Winstead gets 6 to 7, or step 6 to 7, Laurie is 5 to 6, and William Werner is 2 to 3, is the length of time,
It's the length of time that they've been in their position.
and having favorable reports.
Correct.
So, someone like to make the motion? Or is there more discussion?
So, well, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'll
You
second
do
you,
it.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the performance step increase, and we have mentioned their names. Jim Winstead, step 6 to step 7. Lori Spanger, step 5 to step 6. Bill Warner from step 2 to step 3, effective pay period 6, based on performance of employees listed as recommended by the city administrator, effective pay period 6.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes.
The second thing is I'm sorry to inform the council that we have received the resignation from Jeff St. Martin due to personal reasons. Not personnel reasons, personal reasons. You know, the city staff, we wish Jeff the best. He was a true asset to our team. We will miss him, as he did have a good sense of humor and added a lot to the office. And so I have here a motion to accept his resignation, and I'll come back with a plan. Jeff didn't work a lot of hours. He worked between 12 and 15 hours, but was very effective because he processed all of the building permits and helped me out in zoning. And so, much to his charge, I mean, he processed over 250 permits for me, did special projects. And although the hours were very small, he covered a lot of ground, along with waiting on the counter. So it'll be a loss because it was a small amount of hours, but still an important part of what we do here.
I'd like to make a motion to accept Jeff St. Martin's resignation for the administrative technician position.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
That's all I have.
All right, then. If you look at the announcements and reminders, Planning Commission will be August 7th. We already did our city council workshop budget. And would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
You know, when that one plan thing came out, everybody was so excited because they cut paperwork, and that's free money. That was one.